DM2 Software's Vice President of Marketing. I would like to welcome everyone to today's Business Intelligence Basic webinar. Before I introduce our presenter, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. Because of the number of attendees we have on today's webinar, everyone's phones will stay on mute. If you have questions during the webinar, please enter them in the question window that you see on the lower right of your screen. We'll try to answer everyone's questions at the end of the webinar. If we're unable to get to everyone's questions, we'll follow up with everyone individually after the webinar is over. Today's webinar is being recorded. As soon as the recording is available, we'll post it on the customer content page of our website and send you an email to let you know when it's available for download. On that note, I would like to introduce today's presenter, Rob Pierce, our Vice President of Professional Services, to give you an overview of our Business Intelligence Basics tools. All right, Rob, take it away.
Hey, good morning, everyone. This is part one of a two-part series on business intelligence. Tom, I'm getting a little echo. How about you?
Not on my end.
Okay. So, and today we're going to be speaking a little bit to newer members of the audience. We're going to be looking at some of the simpler, easy-to-use tools. In August, we're going to go a little bit more to the higher-end tools. So today's focus, we're just going to keep it on simple concepts and some of the basic application, looking at the sales debt utility, as well as using Excel against the sales debt utility. All right, so the point of our presentation, the promise of ERP, people are buying ERP because they want to improve profitability, improve competitive advantage, lowering costs, improving revenue, getting better info, quicker decisions, quicker action. The way people are doing that is they're implementing a lot of automation. Either it's internal integration. When I enter in my invoice, that information is automatically flowing to my general ledger for financials. It's automatically flowing to TaxLink for compliance reporting. It's feeding into my managerial system for business intelligence. There's also external integration, supply chain. So I'm integrating with my suppliers on purchase orders and buybacks, that cost information flowing in. I'm integrating with my customers through electronic documents or through web portal, customer self-service, e-commerce. And I'm also doing a lot of internal peripheral system integrations with truck automation, with card lock systems, things like that. So automation is becoming more and more popular as people are searching for those ways to cut long-term business costs. As people automate more, that transaction volume is increasing over time. So equally important is to bring in more controls, more balance points, more exception management, alerts. If we're bringing in a higher volume of transactions but we're not making sure it's accurate, then we're bringing more problems into the system. Our reports are going to be less accurate. I've been researching in the BI communities recently what's going on in the world of business intelligence, preparing for today's webinar, and two interesting points came up. They were talking about the data volume, how it's growing at almost 50% increase per year, and the data quality is decreasing by about 10% per year. So that was a real concern for the BI community because it's affecting their reports. And the second data point was in the world of BI, the top concern, and it only appeared 2 years ago, but it's appeared for 2 years in a row now, is the quality of data inside people's ERP systems. They're saying that that quality is really affecting people's ability to get good information out the other side. So as part of a holistic BI solution, we like to encourage folks, not just look at building the reports, not just look at automation, but also paying really strong attention to the controls and alerts and balancing points as you're using that system. All right, so BI is 1/3 of what needs to happen to get this promise of ERP. But if you look at the statistics, about a quarter of companies are really using BI in any meaningful way. And in that statistic, most of those are in the upper tier Fortune 1000 companies. In the mid-tier market, it's a lower percentage. So why should I care? because business intelligence can be part of the competitive weapon. It could really be the useful feedback mechanism to make sure all that automation is happening and it's accurate, and we're leveraging that information to make better decisions, to make corrective actions in our company and become better. BI costs are coming down. When we get to the end of the presentation today, I'm going to show you how the cost to implement what we're going to go through today is really low. The ease of use is improving, and adoption rates are on the rise. We're seeing more and more people show interest in this area, and there's a lot more BI implementations taking place. So from a managerial perspective, it should be important to empower your employees. You're empowering them with technology, with information, so they can be a more effective daily doing their job, making better decisions, taking better corrective action. And then from an employee perspective, I should be interested in this topic because I provide more value when I have the ability to use that information to do better in my job. All right, so before we invest, all of our time today in this, are we even on the right system? So I'm going to do a quick little commercial here for Sage, and then we'll move along. So in this SMB, small medium business, mid-tier ERP market, Sage has 50% more market share than Oracle, SAP, Microsoft, and quite a bit more than Intuit. So the point, just trying to get across in this graphic here, is you guys do have a world-class ERP system. This one is winning in the market, and it's a great one for BI.
Hey, Rob, how does Sage measure mid-tier companies? Is there a user count or a number of employees that they draw the line on?
You should have practiced that one before, Tom. I don't know. I don't know the exact
well, I believe that they consider mid-level companies with 500 employees or less.
Ah, okay.
So I believe when you're looking at these market share comparisons, it's with that 500 company employees or less.
Great. Over the last 5 to 6 years, Sage has been rewriting their entire ERP in what's called object-oriented language. It's also got a few other little buzzwords around it. It's called the new framework, the 4.x architecture, or 3-tiered architecture. This is the platform that the larger, the high 7-figure softwares are running on. They're bringing that technology down to this mid-tier market now. It's been quite an effort. It's an open database. It is SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley, and PCI payment card interface compliant. The purpose of this rewrite is they're really designing it to improve integration and automation going forward, whether that be through web services, cloud services, and mobile devices. DM2 right now, we're in the middle, we're in the process of also rewriting our modules in the same object-oriented language, the same 3-tiered architecture. All right, so there's the end of our little commercial. It is a world-class system. It is a good system to be building BI upon. So this top half, the concepts, we'll try to get through this pretty quick, and we'll spend the majority of our time down below in the application where we're actually inside Excel working with some queries against the sales debt, and I'll explain what sales debt is. All right, so what is BI? It's a webinar. I've got to give you guys a definition here. So if you Google it, most of the definitions are related to using information to make better decisions. And what we're trying to impart to our customers, it goes beyond making decisions. It's really about making corrective actions in your company. And people are the ones that are making those corrective actions, not machines, not the software. It's up to people. So it's using the information from the system to empower those people. So what is the information that empowers people to make better and quicker corrective actions in the company? That's really what we're trying to get to when we talk about business intelligence. So the BI tool versus a BI solution. Solution presupposes a problem. What questions are you trying to answer? What are the business problems you're trying to solve? What are the actions that we're trying to support our employees to take in the business? It's very difficult to put together some good reports or queries unless we have a business case that we're talking about beforehand. In today's presentation, we're going to run through some example questions as we're actually using Excel. But this topic of solution versus tools is a pretty important one. The majority of today's presentation is going to be on the tool aspect. This is an intro into the BI tool of Excel and SQL, so we're going to focus there. I just want to leave everyone with a thought today that the topic is a little bit larger than just put on a spreadsheet and life is good. You should go a little bit deeper into the people and process side. So components of a BI solution, who are the people that are going to be solving the problems? And then talk about what are the technologies that they're going to use to solve those problems. And of course, a process is just wrapping around the whole thing. How and when are people going to use those tools to take actions to solve problems? If we were to give people just a bunch of dashboards, but we didn't describe, who runs it, when do they run it, what do they do with that information, who's going to take corrective action on that information, how often are they expected to do this. If you don't have that whole thing wrapped around it, then most BI implementations don't really do much for a company. BI tools. So the DM2 mass system, has a mountain of BI technologies. The ODBC is the Open Database Compliance. It's a protocol. This is what makes the database open. It's so that your mass system could talk to SQL, it could talk to Excel, it could talk to Crystal, it could talk to any ODBC compliant reporting tool, which is the industry standard. APIs, application programming interfaces, this is what's enabling that expansion of integration to other systems so that you could have electronic file transfers going back and forth. It makes it simpler. Same thing with web services. This is what's opening up your ERP system, making it easier to have web integration with your customers. Then the rest of these, I won't go through them one by one. These are a lot of the BI types of tools that are either included standard in your software or they're available for purchase. In today's presentation, we're really going to focus on Excel and SQL. From a user experience, it's mostly going to be about Excel, but SQL will be on the back end of it.
Rob, that's a lot of different tools, and I know a lot of customers ask me, what tool is really best for them to use. Do you have some insight on that?
Yeah, so this gets back to defining that business problem. What is the business problem we're trying to look at? Are we trying to understand long-term trends? We probably want a tool like SQL that has the capability of looking at millions of records, at lightning speeds. Are we looking at just an open sales order report? We might want to look at something more inside of the ERP, like a Crystal report or one of the business insights dashboards. And then the second half of that evaluation is what are customers comfortable with? Some people have been using Excel for years, decades, and they're really comfortable with it. They want to stay inside Excel. So we've got that option to allow them to stay where they're comfortable. We have other customers that are more comfortable inside Crystal reports, so we can certainly make that the user experience or user interface. And some of our more techie folks who may be in the audience, they want to get outside the ERP, get over into SQL with its reporting tools. So we've got those options across the board. It's usually a combination of evaluating the business problem and how big is the data set they're trying to access versus what are the tools people are comfortable with.
Okay, thanks, Rob. One thing I might mention before you go on there is Sage Mass Intelligence is the replacement for FRX. It is available on 4.4. As people migrate to 4.4, they'll be able to trade in their FRX licenses for an equivalent number of Sage Mass Intelligence licenses. So I just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah, we've done a webinar on that product, and we'll certainly do some more in the future. It's a 4.4 and only forward solution. It's an Excel-based replacement for FRX, as Tom said. But it goes a little bit beyond what FRX does. Not only does it give you access into financial report writing through Excel, but it lets you get access to the non-financial side of the ERP as well. So in some respects, it's kind of overlaps with what we're going to show today. What we're showing today is more SQL-based. That Sage Mass Intelligence tool is what they would call an in-memory analytic processing, so it's a little bit more modern architecture in the world of BI. This is my last ditch attempt here, we're going to focus on tools today, but when you get to the point of a true BI rollout inside your company, please don't ignore the process and the people side of the solution.
Good point.
All right, 2 more things on the concepts and we'll dive into Excel. One way to look at business intelligence is from a timeline perspective. So these questions here, what has happened in the past? What is happening now? What do I want to happen in the future? These are great ways to think of query tools. The tools we're going to look at today, Excel against SQL, is really focused on the 2 on the left. So what has happened over the last 3 years? I'm going to get invoice level detail so I could drill down on anything that I have a question on over the last 3 years. I could drill down to answer that question, why did it happen? So that's the analysis part of it. And then once you understand why did it happen, then you could take the corrective action. The present, the reason why it's handling the present as well is because the solution we're about to show you, it's set up to be automatically triggered every evening. So every evening your data is going to be refreshed up until yesterday. So the data is literally hours old, but it goes back millions of records across the past 3 years. So that's really the power of what we're going to be showing you today. Again, from a user experience, that automatic update is transparent. It's automated in the system through Windows Scheduler every evening. So your experience is really just opening up Excel, clicking a refresh button, and I've got all of that data ready to go. When we get to our August webinar, we're going to talk about this at the end. I want the audience to have some input into what we're going to talk about in August, but we certainly want to incorporate at least a little bit of this future kind of analytics, performance to plan tracking, performance management. So today's presentation will be focused on the left 2. In August, we'll certainly hit some things over there on the right. Roles. So anytime you're talking about a BI rollout inside of your company, you don't want to give the exact same reports to all the different people in the company. Everybody's kind of has different business challenges that they're trying to address. So you really want to talk to the individuals, what's the information they need to do their job better. And those answers are going to be different from person to person, function to function. And that's not only across the organization, but it's up and down as well. So at a more executive level, they're interested in the big picture, they're interested in threats and opportunities, they're looking at long-term trends. More in the tactical area, kind of at the business unit level, they've got some specific targets that they're focused on. They're interested perhaps in some key performance indicators, as well as they want to get automated exceptions pushed to them. Then over on the operational level, so this is more at the process level, the billing clerk entry level, or bill rating processing, or dispatch level. Their typical focus is more on speed and accuracy. So they're looking for something a little bit more real time, what's happening today, what's happening this week. And the last perspective here is input, process, output. So this is just standard kind of textbook theory of building a measurement system. They say don't focus on just lagging indicators or just leading indicators. A nice measurement system is something that would look at both the inputs and the outputs of a process. So this gets into the balanced scorecard theory or any of those kinds of more modern BI concepts. All right, a quick run through the data warehouse concept. So that little blue guy here on the left, this is your DM2 Mass ERP system. So it's got several hundred tables in it, such as your invoice history table, your customer table, your inventory master, all of those great things. You could write reports directly off of it. For some users, it could be a little bit complex, and it puts a burden on your transaction processing system. So one of the better practices is to establish an ETL, and that stands for extract, transform, load. And what it does nightly, automated, is it'll extract information from your mass system, and it's grabbing it from sales history, it's getting some master file information, I think there's like 10 or 12 different tables that it's getting information from. It transforms that information, so it puts it into an easier to use what's called flattened table, so that when you're writing your reports off of it, it's very simple. You don't have to know all the little nuances of the data dictionary. It's been simplified, made it more user-friendly. And then it loads it into the SQL Data Warehouse. So here's the ETL in the middle and the SQL Data Warehouse on the right. So as you may know, SQL Data Warehouses are really efficient at doing millions of record kind of reporting. So all this stuff on the left, what we're going to be showing today, it's a one-time setup. And after it's set up from a user's perspective, you don't have to worry about it. Your experience, again, is going to be Excel pivot tables. And that's where we're headed next in our presentation. So you open up Excel, you click the refresh, and it's going to grab those millions of records which are getting updated every single night from your mass ERP. And again, we're talking about, because it's long-term trends with full drill downs, that's the important part. It's not just long-term trend data, but it's got that full drill down capability. That's what allows us to not only see the larger past trends, but to also drill down into the present activity to understand, what's happening. Okay, so now we're going to hop into the applications side of the presentation. Sales debt. I keep talking about sales debt, and I know a lot of people may not be familiar with what it is. So it's it's another acronym for sales detail. If we look at the fields that are in this table, you see some customer information, you see salesperson, the invoice number, the invoice date, product information, quantity, price, cost. This is all of the kind of information that you would expect to see in a customer's invoice. And part of this ETL, extract, transform, and load, in the transformation, we've kind of enhanced the data, if you will. Some of the math calculations have been performed for you. So in an invoice, it might have quantity, price, and cost, but it doesn't have all of these calculations on those. So we've done some of those calculations for you, so you don't have to worry about it when you're writing reports. They're already handed to you. Other things, for example, is account number and name. We matched these up and presented them to you to make the reporting easier. That wouldn't be very efficient to have over inside your math system, but from a reporting point of view, it just makes it easier for you guys to write reports. Customer type. That's not something that you would see on an invoice. It's coming from the master file, the customer master file. But that's another example of this transform and adding more fields to the sales detail to make it more useful to you from a reporting perspective. Some other examples down here is the month. Having the month and the year separate on an invoice doesn't make sense, but from a reporting point of view, it certainly makes it easier, and we'll kind of see this used in a minute. Another interesting one here is the gross margin categories. So this lets you see the distribution. How many of our invoices fell into the under a nickel margin category? How many of them were in the over a dime category? So those are some of the enhancements we made to this sales detail to make it easier to report.
Rob, when you extract the data from the mass database and put it into the SQL database, you're still retaining all that information in the mass database, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a read-only utility. So all it is doing is reading from the mass system and presenting it over in SQL. It's not doing any manipulations whatsoever over inside the ERP system. Okay, so now we're going to go into, sorry, go ahead.
Just thank you. Thanks.
We're going to go into Excel now and actually show some pivot table functionality. We're going to be using sales debt as the actual table that we're going to be doing all these demos and practices on. So the goal is to impart some pivot table skills today, but I just wanted to leave you guys with some tutorial resources. Microsoft has lots of free tutorials on pivot table skills. Mr. Excel, I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He's got a lot of great free series, as well as 4 paid books and tutorials on how to use Excel. And YouTube is just amazing. If you just go to YouTube and plug in pivot table tutorial, you'll probably find several hundred on how to use it. Okay, so then I'll pop over. This first one, well, let me get to what I have here are a list of business questions. So I wanted to start with business questions that people are asking. If you think about what is a query is a question. So how are gallons trending? What is the average gallon trend per rep? How is gross margin trending? So I started with this list of questions and actually emailed out to consultants and to some customers, and that's where the majority of these questions came from, were consultants and customers. And then I just built queries around some of these questions to answer some of these questions specifically. So again, we're going to get to this at the end of today's presentation, talking about what do you guys want to see in August for the part 2. But if you could think of business questions as we're going through here and looking at these demos, if it triggers some thoughts, if you want to jot them down at the end of today, I'm going to give you my email address and ask you guys, send in more of these questions. And then when we get to August, we'll try to build some more real solutions to answer those questions. So this first one is showing gross margin. And I'm going to go into the design mode of pivot table. So on the left, you see the table result. Here are the months running down the column A. Inside column B, we see the summarized gross margin extension activity for 2009-2010. Most customers prefer to have a running 3 years. In my little demo database that I had, it's only a running 2 years. But please keep that in mind. You can do a running 36 months if you prefer. Over here on the right, we've got a graphical representation of the exact same data, so you can view it either in table format or in graph format. And we're just in stock Excel now, so there's nothing custom about where we're at now. This is standard Excel running against that SQL sales debt database. And on the right, I'm in Excel 2010. In Excel 2010, they introduced a few new features like slicers, so we'll kind of look at these as well. But it is not a requirement that you have Excel 2010. We introduced sales debt in 4.3 back in 2008, before Excel 2010 even existed. So we have lots of customers using it just fine on Excel 2003 and 2007. What's fun about these slicers is you could just, for example, we've got on a business line, you could click on individual, oh, it's going through an autosave. Bear with me as Excel goes through an autosave. Okay, so we could click on these individual slicers which represent the business lines, and you can see how fast it's moving through those millions of rows to update the data. Okay, so how to build one of these, how to build one of these pivot tables. That's one of the core skills that we're trying to learn today. On the left, on the right-hand side, you see the pivot table field list. So in this upper section, you see all of the fields that are available inside of sales debt itself. So this is what's available to play with to build your reports. And in this lower section, this is where you actually build them. So this report area in the upper left, the filter area, this is how you decide what gets to be included or not included into a report. So for example, if I drag the salesperson field into here, you'll notice in the upper left now, the salesperson became a filter. So I could just click on a salesperson, and now this data set just got limited down to a single salesperson. So I'm not doing a good job of finding one that has data. So I'll select all, but it's a way to slice and dice the data based on the salesperson field. It's doing essentially the same thing that the slicer does. So the slicer is just a more modern version of what the report filter is. In the column area, this is what's representing, in this example we have year. So if I look at my table, I see how the year is representing how it's organized into the individual columns. And then over here in the row area, we've got month. So if I look at my table, you can see that the months are what are defining all of the different rows in the table. And then where those two intersect, where the row and the column intersect, the month and the year intersect, what we said is we wanted to do a sum of the gross margin. So the gross margin is the data or the facts that appear in the body of the pivot table. So that's kind of the anatomy of a pivot table, is pretty much rows, columns, and whatever numeric you want to see in the center of it. We could certainly go through and build one from scratch, so I'll do that one time. But then through the rest of this, I kind of want to go through lots of examples and talk about how it's used. Building it's pretty easy. So I'll go through one quick one here. So I just happen to have my data preset here to make it easy for the demo today. You typically would be building it directly off your SQL database. So this is what it looks like if you're trying to build a brand new one from scratch. It presents you with this raw template or canvas to build from. So I'll replicate the one that we just did, for example. So here's my numeric gross margin. All I did was drag it there. Across the top, we wanted to see the year. So I'm grabbing year, put it in the column. And then for the rows, we had month. So I take month and I put it here. So moving 3 fields into this, we've pretty much built 90% of what we need for a pivot table. To change the format, I just right-click anywhere into the body of the table, and I go to Value Field Settings, Number Format. Because this is dollars, I'm going to select currency, and I do not want any decimal places. And even though I clicked on one cell, because it's a pivot table, it knows to format everything in the body the same way. So now, this has given me a corporate-wide view of how are we doing by month, by year for gross margin, but most people want to do a little bit of what's called slicing and dicing and look at it from different perspectives. Maybe I want to look at it by business line or by sales rep or by warehouse, by branch, things like that. So again, we've got 2 choices. If you're on a version prior to 2010, you need to use the report filter. So I could bring, I'll go with business line and drop it into report filter. And now it's giving me a drop down, so I could pick lubes, or I could change it and pick tank wagon. It allows for multiple choices. So if, for example, I wanted to look at tank wagon and card lock together, I could do that. So for any version of Excel, you've got this filter capability. I'm going to remove it, I'm just dragging it out of the box on the left. If I'm in 2010, you might be more interested in the slicer capability. So I'm clicked inside my pivot table, this is important, insert slicer, and it's asking me, what do you want to slice on? Which field in sales debt do you want to slice on? So I'll go ahead and pick business line again. If I can find it. Oh, there it is. And it presents you with a slicer. You could do lots of fun things with the slicers. You could pick different color options. You could change how they're presented. So right now the default is showing me a single column of options. I could go up here to the right and increase this number and have, whatever number of columns I want in my slicer, whatever makes sense. You could resize them, reposition them. Some people like them on the side. Some people like them going across the top. You could have multiple slicers, so I could have business line and rep on here as well at the same time. It gives you more granularity to slice and dice. So in this example, we just created one from scratch. Easy to do. Now what I want to do is go into a few more of these pre-built ones, and we'll talk about those. This is another real common one. So the first one we saw was how is gross margin trending across the business by month and by year. Two of the other important high-level trend ones is gallons and cents per gallon, because obviously gallons times your cents per gallon equals your gross margin. So people they're interested in that interplay between how are we pricing and what's the effect on volume. So this one, it's almost the exact same report. The only difference is that we're looking at gallons instead of gross margin. This one, and we played around with the formatting a little bit just to give you guys some examples. This one's looking at the cents per gallon. So this one we did have to do something a little bit unique, so I'll show you how we got that calculated field, and we threw on some icon sets on here as well. So to get the cents per gallon, we did have to do something a little different inside here. Inside the design area, options area, here we go, calculated fields. So I'm in pivot table options under field items and sets, and we created a formula. You could do this inside Excel just like you could create formulas in most reporting tools. And the formula we used, we said that if the gross margin per unit is not 0, then go ahead and divide the gross margin per unit to be by the product gallons. So what is my cents per gallon? What is my gross margin cents per gallon? So that was the formula that we built. Once we built that formula, we were able to include it in our pivot table. So when you build a formula, it actually shows in this list of fields available. So it adds it to what's available for you to report on in addition to everything else inside sales data. And we just dragged it down into the values area, and now we're able to trend on what is our gross margin cents per gallon. One of the requests in the list of business questions was people were interested in not only what is our cents per gallon by business line, but perhaps what is it by sales rep. So there's a little note to myself to remember that. So I'm going to get rid of the business line filter, and I'm going to go ahead and include a slicer on the sales rep. So I just need to be clicked somewhere inside the table. That's important. Then I go up to Insert, Slicer. It says here are all the fields that are available. We want to click on Salesperson. And that's really it. I mean, now I could sit here and slice and dice on different salespeople and look at what are their cents per gallon contributions. After you look at those 3 high-level trends, how are my gallons trending? How's my gross margin trending? How are the cents per gallon trending? People are usually interested in what's behind those trends. Why is something moving in one direction or versus the other? So the 2 places they typically next go is what's going on with the customers or what's going on with my inventory. So the next 2 tabs that are real common in our core queries that most people elect to take are what we call the customer drill down and the inventory drill down. So in this customer one, for example, you could have every single customer that's made purchases over the last 3 years. You could have it trended by year. In my case, I just have 2 here, 2009, 2010. And you could see what they've purchased. In this case, we're doing it by gallons, but you can, again, you could look at this by gross margin if you preferred. But I could see how their gallon purchases, what their buying patterns, what their behaviors are across time. So we'll take, system's going through an automatic save. That's just a setting I have in Excel, so I need to let it go through that automatic save here.
While you're waiting for that, I know you mentioned that I think you referred to them as pre-built. All these tabs that you're scrolling through on the bottom. When someone works with our professional services consultants to get SQL set up, which is, as you said, is a standard feature already in the system, they would get all these pre-configured reports?
Yeah, so there's two ways to do it. One way is we've got a template, an Excel template that we could give to someone and you could configure it to work with their SQL. Most people prefer to go through the building exercise as part of the training exercise. So we would work with your person, whoever is going to be responsible for kind of maintaining your BI queries, and we would just build them together. I mean, we could build 6 of them in just a matter of a half hour to an hour. So most
sure, you demonstrated how easy it is to put one together.
Right. Okay, so the point of this particular one is by customer. You could see how are they buying from year to year. You could see how those trends play out from month to month. In this case, it's a demo database, so these names ran through a utility that gave them all funny names. This particular customer, you could see that they were buying pretty regularly, but then suddenly between June and July of 2010, they just suddenly stopped buying. So this is one way to get to that age-old question, who has stopped buying? Or if you want to look at the numbers themselves, who's buying less, who's in decline? So that was kind of where this query was born from, was that business question, who has stopped buying or who is buying less? It does take a little bit of effort to go through all of your customers to do it, so we're going to come back and revisit that question a little bit later, but this is certainly an important query. So let's say you want to know a little bit more about this. You'll notice we've got some columns up here, product line and product description. It's very common that when you're in a query, you're doing this high-level analysis, you're looking at these trends, it just kind of triggers, what's the next question, what's the next question? The next question is, well, what do they buy? So we could certainly open it up by product line, and these are the 2 kinds of product lines they buy. Okay, well, what are they buying in that product line? So this level of drill down, you have complete control over. You can establish by customer, by year, by product line, by product description. So, your question to me is probably, how do I have control over that? How do I establish what these drill down patterns are? So again, I'm clicked anywhere inside the pivot table. I'm going up to design mode, click on the field list. In this field list, it's the order in which you have these fields populated. That's controlling your drill down pattern. So for example, well, I'll just show you. This inventory one, it's just got a different drill down pattern. It's starting with the product line, going to year, to customer, to product description. So it's the exact same query. All I did was I dragged some fields to the front of the drill down pattern. Other than that, there's no difference between these 2 queries. I mean, I literally right-clicked on this tab, move or copy, create a copy. So I just made a copy of the drill down. There's the original customer drill down. Here's the new copy that I just created. I come over here to product line, and I'm dragging it to the top. And that fast, I've just changed the drill down pattern. So now it's going from product line to customer to year. Another way I could do it right here inside the query itself. So for example, if I'm right-clicking on customer, I'm clicked on the customer, I'm right-clicking. Now I could say move left, move right. So again, this is another way to move that through the drill down pattern. So I can move them to the left. In 2010, you've got these little plus and minus buttons to expand and collapse. In versions prior, the way you would open, collapse, or expand is to double-click on the field. I believe that works in here as well. Yeah, so right now all I'm doing is double-clicking, and it's kind of toggling between that expand and close. So it works the same way in 2010. The buttons just may be a little bit more intuitive for some folks. Okay, I'm looking at the time. I'm going to have to step it up here. We're going to run out of time. So inventory, that's another popular one to look at the patterns. What are my inventory items which are growing or in decline? This daily flash is a very popular report. If you look at the history of financials, people would find out how do they do at the end of the month when they're looking at their financial package. Now that you have access to real-time operational data through business intelligence solutions, people are more interested in what's going on in the month throughout the month. So in this example, they could put period 10 of 2009 on the left, and day by day, I can see where my gallons, revenue, and gross margin are. And then you could put the same period for 2010 on the right. And then as you're actually in the middle of period 10 for 2010, you could compare it. How are we doing? How is this month this year doing to the same month last year? Or I could put this month against just last month. It doesn't have to be year-to-year comparison. It could be period-to-period or quarter-to-quarter. And if I want to slice and dice it a little bit, I could do it by business line. Well, in card lock, we're doing okay, but maybe in equipment, we're not doing so okay. So there's lots of ways to get what we'll call real time. That real time is always put in quotes because people define it in different ways. For some people, information that's as current as yesterday is real time enough for them to make some important business decisions to affect how their month is going to turn out. So daily flash, very popular report. Truck gallons, another popular report. Everybody's interested in how their trucks are doing. So this particular one is showing the trucks down the left column here, the rows. And in this particular query, it's the months going across the top here. So how many gallons are my trucks carrying each month? We just happen to pick month for demo purposes, but you could do this by week, by day. You could do it at whatever granularity you want. We threw a heat map on this. So again, this is part of what 2010 is bringing to the table. They put a lot more what we'll call data analysis tools inside of 2010 to help people make meaning of the data. So by putting a heat map on this, it just makes it easier to see where are the trucks busier and where are they less busy. So June is obviously, and it just pops out. It's a real popular month here. Another little data analysis tool that they added in there are these trend lines or micro trends. So again, these are just stock features inside of Excel, and they can be useful to helping people make sense of, if you're not comfortable looking at all the numbers on there, you get some graphical representations. This one is, okay, so the first one was gallons. This one's gross margin. So truck profitability is certainly on everybody's mind. And we just use icon sets instead of heat maps. So there's a lot of these different kinds of conditional formatting. They got data bars. You could do color scales, icon sets. So there's a lot of choices out there for people to pick, whatever makes sense for them, whatever is visually attractive. Customer average price. So one of the business questions that came in from a customer is that their customers ask them, hey, what was our average price that we paid over the last month, 2 months, quarter, what have you? And I just want to make a point between average price and weighted average. So a little mock-up here, 100 gallons at $1 is $100, 500 gallons at $2 is $1,000. So if we took the average of these prices, if you were to take the price field and put it into a pivot table and say, show me the average, it's going to say $1.50 because, that's the average of $1 and $2. That's really not what people are looking for. What they're really more interested is, what's my weighted average? In this case, they bought more gallons at $2. So to get to that, you need to build a formula. So you would look at what's the extended price, what's the extended gallons, and divide those out. So this is an example of a formula down here where they took the extended sales extension divided by the gallons, and it's giving a true weighted average price. So when you're going to get into anything having to do with averages or percentages and pivot tables, you're probably going to need to build one of those calculated fields, kind of like we did back with the cents per gallon. here's an example that we used that formula. So all I did was take that customer drill down, and I replaced the numeric. Instead of being with gallons, I changed it to be average price. So in this query, by customer, by year, by month, I could see what is that customer's average price and how is it trending. Okay, so in this query, I was trying to run through all of these business questions to address these A kinds of questions. I've got another query I'm going to bring up here in a second to get down to a few of these B questions. Some of the questions that came in I couldn't get to with only sales debt. So people were asking questions like, what are the products I haven't sold but I still have in inventory? That would require me linking over to the inventory master file, which we can certainly do. It just wasn't kind of part of what we're going into today. So that's something perhaps we'll show in August. What is my customer turnover ratio, retention rates? Again, those are some enhancements that we've been making. We could go into that in August. Email me if there's a negative gross profit on an invoice. That's a great knowledge sync solution. Anytime you want automated emails sent out, think about credit alerts or knowledge sync. Those are great tools for that. Inventory turnover ratios. So again, that's just running these same kinds of queries, but against different tables, not necessarily sales debt. Days sales outstanding, that's another popular enhancement that folks have done to sales debt. Because the system knows what the invoice date was and when it was paid and when the due date is, we don't have to approximate a DSO through financial calculations. We could give you the actual numbers. We could go right to the real truth. Okay, so I'm going to switch out real quick. I'm going to close down.
Rob, just want to make you aware we got about 8 minutes left.
Okay, no pressure, Tom. So I'm switching out queries. When you're creating these pivot tables and these workbooks off of a data source that has millions and millions of records in it, you probably don't want to have more than, say, 8 to 10 queries in any one given workbook because you're kind of pushing the limits of Excel. So just a kind of a rule of thumb. It depends on how big your data set is and how complex your queries are. So one of the best practices is have multiple workbooks if you really have dozens of queries going. It's doing its initial load of those millions of records, so that's what it's going through right now. But once it's up and going, you guys saw that it's pretty quick once it's initially loaded. Okay, so now we're going to hit some of these B-type questions. So which customers have decreased, by gallons, by gross margin over a timeline? Which customers are not buying from me now, but they bought from me before? And I didn't get a question to this credit rebill one, but I can describe it real quick. So customers buying less. There's two ways to do this. One way is to drag the product gallon field into the values area twice. So the Excel allows you to do that. You could take one metric, one numeric, and drag it into the values field twice. And then in that second field, I can do it here. You could say, show it as a difference from the previous year. So even though it's the exact same metric, I could say present it as a calculation where it's showing me the difference between the prior year. So here's the gallons for 2009, here's the gallons for 2010, and this is the difference. It's doing a calculation for you. It's a really powerful, important part of Excel. Some of the limitations are that once you use that kind of capability, the next thing I would want to do is sort it. I'd want to know, okay, who are my biggest variances? I want them all at the top. I don't want to scroll through thousands of records trying to dig out which are the most important ones. But if you try to sort, it's got some limitations. We're bumping up to the limitations of standard Excel. It's going to tell me, oh, I really bumped to the limitation of Excel. It would tell me that you've already got a calculation on here. We can't kind of sort on top of these other calculations. It's actually just doing a data read right now. So what I wanted to show you is a workaround to that. So in this instance, what I did is I just built two separate numerics. I built one numeric saying that if the year is 2009, populate me with gallons. And this one is a separate field. If it's 2010, populate me with gallons. So if I scroll down, you'll see I actually built two separate numerics. You can do those kinds of things. And now I've got two separate numerics instead of trying to do a difference from calculation. And then I built another one of those calculated fields on top of that. So I'll show you the calculated field real quick. Sorry, it's going through another data read. So it was simply, take this numeric that I built and subtract the other numeric that we built. So what was powerful about that was this does allow us to sort. So now we could see who had the largest decline in gallon volume between 2009 and 2010. And what was interesting, the ones that, in this test data set, the ones that had the largest decline were not necessarily customers who left us. They're still doing business with us. They're just doing a lot less business with us. Kind of equally important is perhaps, on the other end of the spectrum. So I could either scroll down to the bottom of this report, or I could just change the sort. I'll try changing the sort. And this is, who has had the biggest increase with us. It's kind of important to understand who those people are. Maybe we need to go out and spend some extra time with them. Maybe they made a big acquisition and there's another opportunity out there. So it's usually understanding what's going on the ends of the queries is what's important to drive decisions. This next query is, who are the customers who stopped buying from us? So literally, I've got a couple guys negative here. We gave them credits. But who went to zero with us, and they weren't zero with us last year? So those were the two big questions that we were trying to get to. Who stopped buying and who is leaving? Who's on their way out? So we could go do something about it. Okay. I'm going to switch back over to our presentation.
Okay, good timing. We're about the 2-minute warning mark here.
So how do we get sales debt? Tom, can you still see my whole screen?
I can. You're looking good.
Okay, thanks. It is included. Sales debt, the ETL utility is included as part of the DM2 offering from the very beginning of 4.3. So if you're on 4.3 or a higher version, you've got it. SQL, I can't move my mouse. SQL, for most of you, either you've got CRM, or you've got retail solution, or you've got some instance of SQL already. If you don't, you could download SQL for free. It's called SQL Express. It's free from Microsoft. Most people on the phone already have Excel. I like Excel 2010 because of the data analysis tools, but 2003 and 2007 work fine. So the point of this is there's not a lot of investment to get this thing up and going. You might have to spend a little bit of time on some IT to get some things installed, configured, get them talking to each other through the ODBC. But we're talking about hundreds or $1,000. We're not talking about $10,000 or $20,000 like a lot of BI solutions out there. All right, what's in BI Part 2? So this is where I've got some ideas. We could go into SQL views. SQL is really powerful. We've been doing some fun things out there. Performance to plan queries, mashing up data with CRM or truck data. We could talk more about what does it really take to create a real BI solution, beyond just the BI tools, but talking about the people and process components. How to really define a business problem so you can be successful in delivering some stuff. KPIs, dashboards. Now, there's a lot of things we could talk about in Part 2. What I'm really interested in is what do you guys want it to be? So this is going to be something kind of new at DM2 is I'm trying to make it co-creation. Just email me. There's my email address right there. What do you guys want to see in this next one? What are the critical business areas that you're trying to make improvement? A lot of you guys have been doing this for a while. You're probably better at it than I am. So if you've got something cool that you want to share with the group, you want to send a screenshot, we'll include it in the webinar. If you want to actually participate in the webinar, Tom could switch the desktop over to yours, and you could show us what you're doing. So the canvas is wide open. We'll make whatever BI Part 2 be what you guys want it to be.
Great, Rob. Thank you. So as Rob mentioned, in August, we're going to have the second part of the Business Intelligence webinar series there. But I do want to make you aware of what we've got planned for next month. On July 12th at 11:30 Pacific, 1:30 Central, we're going to be talking about the new features that are coming out in our 4.403 release. Most of these features kind of fall into the category of better cost accounting, so it'll help you get even more accurate gross margins. So wanted to make you aware of that. Mark your calendars for that. And then we are a couple of minutes over, but we only have a few questions, Rob, so why don't I go through those. First one I can handle. Kim with PetroStar has asked if the slides will be available after the webinar. And yes, Kim and everyone else, we will make the slides available as well as a recording of the webinar. We'll put that on our customer content page of our website. It'll take us a few days to get all that material up there. As soon as it's up there, we're going to send a message out to everybody to let you know it's there and let you know how to download it. Next question came in from Bo over at Victron. We actually answered this earlier on. He had asked if the data is retained in both DM2 and the SQL database after you've done the extraction. And yes, it is, as Rob mentioned. It's read-only out of MAS, so you're going to retain all of that in the MAS database. Next question that came in is from Sean over at Interstate. He's saying, what about dashboards for management? They really want it at a moment's notice without the need to refresh and create the report. Rob, maybe you can address that.
Yeah, we've built some dashboards using Excel. So Excel is the technology we've been talking about today, and it's a real popular technology because people are just comfortable with it. There's other kinds of tools that are geared for dashboards like Excelsius. I think they've actually renamed that. Crystal Reports. If you guys are interested in dashboards for August, I'm happy to mock up a couple and show them to you. As far as the refreshing, you guys know how Excel works. You could actually set your pivot table options to auto-refresh, but it's not like they would have to rebuild them every day. The reports, the dashboards, they could be pre-built, so they could either auto-refresh when they open or they click a button and it refreshes for them. If you've got some ideas specifically for what you want to see in a dashboard, please send them over and we'll do our best to mock them up and actually demo some of that stuff.
Great, thanks, Rob. And then a couple more quick questions here, hopefully quick questions, and then we'll wrap up. Sean's asking again, what is the formula for the gallon 2009 and gallon 2010?
Yeah, it was just an if statement. if the year is 2009, then populate with gallons. And then the other one was if the year is 2010, then populate with gallons.
Okay. And then just a quick comment from Sean. He's saying yes for August. That'd be fantastic. So I think he's addressing what you said about putting together some more examples there.
Yeah, great.
All right. Well, we are out of time, and actually that's the last of the questions. So I just want to remind everyone again that today's webinar has been recorded. We'll post it up on the customer content page of our website along with a copy of Rob's presentation slides, and we'll send an email around to let everybody know when it's available for download. I know it's a lot of material that we covered, and I'm sure a lot of you will have questions come up after the webinar is over. If you think of any questions that you'd like us to answer, please feel free to email us at sales@dm2.com. And I'd just like to thank Rob again for doing a great job on covering SQL and the business intelligence basics. And I'd like to thank everyone for their time and attention today. And that concludes today's webinar. We'll see you next month.
Bye.
Thanks.